Direct from our newsroom in Washington.
Yeah, all right, just so you know, my computer can hear us now.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Yeah, she is.
From around
And
the
just so
world,
you also know,
and from our headquarters in New York,
and
this
the
is the
computer can hear
CBS
us.
Evening News with Dan Ratney.
Oh, it's already started.
San Francisco, the United Nations, Islamophicator,
Stand by, ready, three, take three, Mike, you three, slow zoom in a little bit. Roll take three. Ready, team, four. Ready, camera, three, one, center off.
Good evening, I'm David Walker.
And I'm Laura Park. Now here's the news.
Good evening, I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
From ABC News.
Hello, I'm Eric After with the Oklahoma. Just a few years ago, this entire piece of property was nothing more than trees. Good evening, Edmund. Welcome to the Edmund Mineral Forest.
Past couple of weeks are showing once again just how tough the business of news is right now. With layoffs by digital upstarts and by the country's largest newspaper chain, Gannett.
My name is Sean Hannity, and I've been at Fox from day one, October 1996.
Someone else noticed that your For You page has been a little too accurate lately. It hasn't been things that I'll Google or I talk about. It's been thoughts.
TikTok knows everything about us.
Social media footage has played a key role in our coverage of Ukraine, making us able to identify military movements and also possible attacks. But it's also really important that we understand the footage is real and accurate and current.
Tonight, part one of a two-night special.
We face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy.
The hate speech, divisive political speech, and misinformation on Facebook and the family of apps are affecting societies around the world.
When we live in an information environment that is full of angry, hateful, and polarizing content, it erodes our civic trust, it erodes our faith in each other, it erodes our ability to want to care for each other. The version of Facebook that exists today is tearing our societies apart and causing ethnic violence around the world.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's having a good day. Last lecture before spring break. I'm going to be lecturing today, and we're going to be talking about social media. So sit back, get your note pens out and everything. Technology today is not my friend. Anyways, you saw a few clips of me there. I've been a journalist for multiple years, working on a PhD now, but these are some of the publications I've worked at. I worked at the Oklahoma for 3 years, kind of a multimedia journalist. So I did print, photography, videography, and everything. And then my work has appeared in all these other groups. And then I also worked for Kaiser Health News as well, reporting on COVID deaths of doctors. Kind of an interesting thing. So these are my pictures. Been around everywhere. I've seen everything. I've seen shootings, cremations, dead bodies. This lady, she was a doctor giving away pills. Seen it all. It's been enjoyed. So the topics today, I'll write this down a little bit. We're going to be talking about control of the media. That's a big thing right now with things going on in Russia this last week. So it's a pretty current lecture. I don't think I can get any more current. Then we're going to talk more about social media, micro-local media, traditional news, and then end with the point of life. Does not like anything. And so, big question that we have to get forward, moving forward on social media and the media, is that we have to get both sides of the story. That way we can better understand what is going on in that sense. This is by Walter Cronkite. You saw him earlier. And when Walter Cronkite used to speak back in the day, everybody listened. He was the journalist of his day. So, pulled out some fake posts on the internet. It's not me. Here's two I found. This was from snoops.com. This little girl speaking to this Russian military person. You think, oh, that's nothing bad, but it's still false. Then another one, you'll have to giggle about because you're college students, talking about Pornhub being stopped in Russia. Both fake. Now we may, and here's what I'm getting at with this, is that we may see fake posts out there, and we don't think anything of it. It doesn't hurt anybody, but it desensitizes us to fake news. And that's what we're seeing in today's society is people are being desensitized. Oh, it's not bad fake news. It's just false. And it's funny. These were shared millions of times online. And you know, this kind of funny news stuff, it even affects me. You know, I found this post perusing last night. Time for a new battery. I found this on OU Love Letters. I think it's true. Some people may say it's false news, but you're like, oh, we gotta go look now. It goes to this point, who decides what's true and what's not? We all know this is true, but then for some of you, you may say it's not true. And we're going to get into that when the government gets involved. That's a big thing. And that's happening in Russia right now.
That's funny.
So, social media. Who does not have time in here for things? Yeah, got a couple honest people. Okay, who's an iPhone user in here? Ah, pull out your phone. This is where your phone comes in handy today. And we're going to look at screen time. Oh, no. Well, we're going to talk social media. We got to talk about screen time. So what I want you to figure out is what app do you use the most and how much time do you spend on it? This is kind of an interesting thing. You're kind of embarrassed what's going on. Okay, who has more than 4 hours on one app? Right here. No, per day. Yeah, how much time do you spend? 46 hours a week. What do you got? Yeah, for the day.
3 hours on YouTube.
3 hours on YouTube. Pretty interesting. Not today. Yeah. Who else over here? I'm going to come around to you, so you better be ready. How much time do you spend?
2 hours.
Is that your most used app? No, I see TikTok there.
Just like 30 minutes.
Oh, okay. She's got time limits on hers. So that's kind of interesting. Oh, question. What's going on in Ukraine?
I don't know.
You don't know what's going on in Ukraine?
I do.
What's going on?
Just don't pay attention to it.
Okay, I got to find somebody a little more smarter. Okay, what's going time?
I have 15 minutes on Canvas.
Check yesterday.
Hold on, let's just restart.
Y'all are lying to me.
Alrighty.
I know y'all spend more time. Okay, Instagram.
3 hours.
3 hours. What's
Okay.
going on in Ukraine?
Russia's invading Ukraine.
Is it a war? Potentially. Kind of interesting. Okay, well, I'm gonna have you do. I'm gonna have you sit up there. Okay, over here. Gentlemen, how much time do you spend? Y'all are hiding your iPhones.
3 hours and 16 minutes on YouTube.
There you go. What's going on in Ukraine?
As far as I know, there's a war between Russia and Ukraine.
Is that good?
No.
Can I have you sit up front? Yeah. Getting a theme going here. Okay, I'm gonna come over here, scare some people over here. How much time do you spend?
Like on average,
Yeah, I see Snapchat right.
2 hours a day.
That says 8 hours. 8 hours and all week. 8. Okay, so 2 hours a day on Snapchat. 11. Yeah. What's going on in Ukraine?
Russia's invading the Ukraine.
Is that good?
Not for them.
Have you talked to anybody about this?
Not really.
Not really. Seen anything on social media?
Yeah.
Can you go sit up front? Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna come over here. Something tells me I got a time record over here. There was one guy, 33 hours on one app per week. So that's pretty impressive.
About 2 hours a day on Instagram.
How much time do you spend, Instagram? What's going on in Ukraine?
US just cut our crude oil imports from Russia.
Are we at war?
Huh?
Are we at war?
Not yet. We haven't.
No, I mean Russia and Ukraine. Is that a war?
It's an invasion.
Ooh, smart man over here. You're not going up front.
Good for you. I was
Too
at 3
smart.
hours.
Too smart. Anybody else? Okay. Mr.
On a daily basis, I spend about 7 hours on YouTube.
7 hours on YouTube. What's going on in Ukraine?
Russia got greedy and they decided to invade Ukraine, and we're cutting off oil.
Is this a war?
Not for the US, but for Ukraine and Russia, absolutely.
Oh, good. Can you go up front? Oh. So what's happening here? What's the common theme that's coming out of these? Anybody? You're saying it's a war, right? Oh. Who's calling it a special? Putin is. He's calling it a special military operation. And what's interesting, clicker works, is what's happening is there's a new law for social media. So all these people up to 15 years in jail. You ready to go to jail? Yeah. Well, I know you are. But right now, because what you told me, over in Russia, you have to respond. All of you would be going to jail. The slammer. Thank you all for your time. Yeah. Y'all can go sit down. Anyways, let's give them a round of applause. Great contestants. But anyways, we see a lot of time spent on social media. 7 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour. I know a lot of y'all been taught. I know these guys back here love watching football videos. So there's a lot of time that we're spending on social media. So it's kind of taking over our lives. So this week, also some QR codes you can also look at. Good stuff. Facebook has been blocked. Twitter has been blocked pretty much in Russia. TikTok no longer letting people upload new material. So you TikTok influencers in here can't post your newest video. And then we see these news sources have left Russia. It's pretty big. So media to the people is not getting there. They're like this girl over here who has no clue what's going on. And most Russians don't think it's a war. So pretty interesting stuff going on over there. And then in Russia and China, an interesting part is these countries control their media. It's state-controlled media. So who in here would love to hear their media filtered through the White House? You don't want to hear Biden filter all your media or Trump filter all your media? No. Over in China and Russia, that's what happens. So I think it's important you understand that Putin and Xi Jinping are controlling what their people hear. This is a freedom here in the United States that we take for granted a lot. Then one thing you also need to know here in the United States, I know our good friend Sarah Palin's trying to sue the New York Times, though she lost, is this libel and slander lawsuits. Make sure you understand what libel and slander is. Libel's written defamation, slander spoken defamation. Is that these people have to show actual malice. And there's this court case, New York Times v. Sullivan, that kind of briefly talks about, well, in long form, talks about that. So make sure you understand that. Oh, and this QR code goes to a map of all the countries back there, and you can see which ones are most free and which ones are not. So we have a poll today, and Melody's going to put it up live. Should the government regulate social media? Do you believe the White House or certain organizations should be regulating social media? Big question. We'll have multiple polls today, so you're going to be on your phone a lot. Hey, it's working. So 2 organizations here in the United States that do a great job of controlling kind of the media landscape, not as much as in Russia and China, is the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and they're responsible for governing interstate and international communications. So what was, Trump had a beef with what's social media app? TikTok. Yeah, why? No. Yeah, China was spying on us. So he was going to try to use this group to control what was on TikTok and bring them into the United States. Very interesting. So they oversee radio, television, all the kind of wireless communications that are out there, big federal government agency. Then why do I have this one up here? Do I have any business majors? Why would this be up here? Anybody know? Why would the SEC get involved in social media? Got some? Oh, big questions. Big, yeah.
They make a lot of money.
Yeah, they make a lot of money off it. Off who?
Us.
Ah, bingo. The first class, we were talking about how Lululemon's on your Instagram feed, and you got to click it and you got to go buy something. So the SEC is very interested in how the investors of social media companies are interacting with those. You'll be within like a foot. There we go. So Melody will have our results here in a second. We'll see how we compare. This is the United States. So most people think tech companies should regulate. 61% said no. 18% said no, but media companies should regulate. So that's this yellow. 19% said yes, only if false information. So that's right here. And then 1% said yes. So that's here. So we see the majority of Americans would like social media companies to regulate, but a good portion thinks the government should regulate. What does, in Russia, we know what they say is right and wrong, but how do we know in the United States what's right and wrong? What's false information? It could be something they don't like, right? Like in Russia, we're calling it an invade or military operation and not an invasion or war. So big thing here, this is what applies to you. This happened last fall. It's called the Facebook Files. A whistleblower came out and was talking about all the predatory practices that were happening in Facebook and Instagram. She worked there, and her name is Frances Hugan. This lady brought a lot out, and there's some very interesting points coming on here. The biggest thing was research shows Facebook coveted young users despite health concerns. We don't talk about the mental health aspects of social media, but that's a big thing. People can get addicted to it. So let me ask you, you're like, I'm not addicted 4 hours a day. How many times have you worried about when a post goes out on Instagram? What time of day? Because you get more likes at certain times of day. Yeah, some of you shaking your head, you don't be posting at 5 in the morning. Or you take a post down because it's not getting enough likes. Interesting things like that. And it's gone so far, people are starving themselves. You have to look a certain way to go on social media. When you post something, you don't look ugly, Macy here down here knows. So I call people out. So that's the one big area is that Instagram and now TikTok is being investigated for the same practices. It's big. Then Facebook is not able to effectively police anti-vaccine information. You saw your grandma, I'm going non-left right here, your grandma posting about something about vaccines that was completely off the wall, false, but Facebook was not controlling it fast enough. Facebook does not know how many active users it has. That's big for the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, because they're defrauding investors is what they're doing. That will be proved in the courts, but that's an interesting thing in how the group can get involved, the federal agency. Facebook employees flag drug cartels, but they're slow to respond. I'm not saying they're selling you drugs, but Facebook's all around the world, and it's something that they have to watch out for. So this will take you to the Facebook Files, but TikTok is the next one coming forward. So here are some tools Facebook put in place to kind of hamper news and all that kind of stuff. And this shows that certain news organizations could have a bigger growth if these tools weren't around. And you can see it affects the more crazy ones. MSNBC is not that crazy, but Breitbart up here could have had a much bigger audience growth if Facebook had to put these tools in place to curtail false information. And without that, more fake news would have been out. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch a very short video. This is from our friend Sasha Gilthorpe. She works at DC for Bully Pulpit Interactive. It's a national advertising group. that does campaigns, mostly Democratic, and has some great points about organic sharing and media. We'll talk about that.
There has been very limited self-regulation of organic content on social media. In general, we see that Republicans have a much more dynamic organic social presence that reaches far more people than Democrats have. I shared with you something from the Center for American Progress, and within that Medium post, you'll find different charts about different pages' organic Facebook reach.
This is where the truth don't lie. You find out who your friends are. Somebody's gonna drop everything.
And we see overwhelmingly that these Republican organizations really have dedicated social media users who see all of their posts, they share all of their posts. And for a variety of reasons, Democratic pages do not have that kind of reach. They do not have that kind of dedication. And so Democrats rely much more on the paid advertising on social media or otherwise to reach their voters in a way that Republicans don't. So a criticism that you will hear from a lot of Democratic operatives is that the advertising regulations are fair in many ways, but they aren't effective because they aren't the whole story. And by focusing solely on the advertising, you're really limiting Democratic opportunities, where if you were to take those regulations and focus both on organic and on paid, it would be truly fair.
It should also be noted, Sasha, I didn't tell us in first class, she was kind of one of the voices behind Joe Biden in his last election, the campaign. So she has a little bit of power in the social media world there at Bully Pulpit. So interesting, what does organic social media have anything to do? Do I have any journalism, marketing majors in here? Gosh, that college didn't have a lot of people out there. Oh, I got two. I got one. What's organic sharing? Do you know? No. Okay. So I'm going to use the example of our crazy conservative uncle and our loony liberal aunt. You know, we all got one. You know, if you're not, you don't know who it is, you're probably it. Your crazy conservative uncle posts something on Facebook, and your loony liberal aunt posts something on Facebook. Who's going to get more likes and shares on their post? The crazy conservative uncle. Just how the algorithms and everything is built. That's what she's showing. And she's showing that Democrats have to pay more in paid advertising to get their messages across to you all. So what that means is false information from either side spreads faster on the Republican side, the more conservative side than the liberal side. So very interesting. So we see our group, this is us in here, most of us. Happy birthday, Melody. Just thinking about that. It's her birthday today. We see that 18, 29-year-olds obviously get more news from their social media app, all that, use it more. But we're using social media, news websites, all the technology more to get our news than any other generation out there. So it's very interesting. You see your grandparents don't get anything out there. They're still on the traditional print thing. Got a poll. Oh, attendance. I got to get off TikTok. So one interesting thing is we see Democrats also use social media a lot more than Republicans. We see that all the way down. Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp really is live. The only thing that Republicans beat out is Pinterest. I don't know why, but you know, they're pinning. Kind of interesting there, but they're pretty close on usually everything. Not much difference. So it's kind of interesting. Do you see yourself up there as well? So we're also seeing wider partisan gaps in the news and what people believe in with social media and all that kind of stuff. We see that most people don't trust social media. I disagree with this completely, this poll. I think people don't even know they believe in social media. They just scroll and it just kind of becomes their rhetoric and what they see. If you see something enough, you start believing it. If you don't believe me, look what just happened in Texas in the most recent election. That's a different story, different day. So national news organizations, we see Republicans are trusting the news a lot less. This is like your ABC, NBC, all that kind of stuff. Local news organizations, kind of your local groups, they have the most trust, even though they rarely have anything good on. So that's kind of interesting that the Republicans trust the news media a lot less. So one area we want to talk about is micro-local media. Journalism which focuses on a particular issue within a small regional scale. So kind of like your local news sources. There's kind of this growth of nonprofit. We're going to hear from Trey Savage here at Non-Doc, Oklahoma City. And he kind of explains a little bit about this kind of area. Do I have any news lovers in here? Anybody love the news? Oh, I got a couple. What news source do you use most? Yeah. NPR? NPR? Oh, she's not news. Anybody over here? Yeah. New York Times. There you go. Fox News. Good. We got it. Yeah. Wall Street Journal. Me too. The Lester Holt podcast. There you go. I got one back here. The Chicago Tribune. Oh, we can talk about that one here in a second. It's kind of interesting. So non-doc, Trey Savage is going to talk. It's very micro-local media. It's based here in Oklahoma City, and it's kind of a different scale than what you're maybe used to with these national organizations.
I'm Trey Savage. I'm the editor-in-chief of nondoc.com. We're an online independent journalism publication based here in central Oklahoma. We launched in September 2015 as a small startup for-profit. Figured out over time that selling ads is, a hard thing to do in the digital environment, and we transitioned to nonprofit operations in December 2019. Yeah, I think NonDoc started in an effort to fill a void. And we didn't necessarily know what we were going to be when we started. The name non-doc is short for non-doctrine or non-doctrinaire. We found that in a Walter Cronkite quote from 1973 in an edition of Playboy magazine, where he talked about being non-dogmatic, having an open mind, approaching a situation without preconceived notions about the individual or the situation at hand. So that became sort of a guiding principle for our newsroom and how we tried to display traditional journalism ethics, try to be transparent, try to issue corrections, try to use hyperlinks and embed documents in a modern journalistic sense. We are going to try to provide basic coverage of the facts, the first draft of history of our government institutions, while also highlighting other individuals of note, getting people on the record, setting the stage for larger pieces, more investigative style journalism where you start to piece things together. Primarily, our news coverage is focused on state issues, state legislature, political campaign seasons, and more recently we've been trying to cover more of tribal affairs in the state of Oklahoma, tribal elections, which often are neglected in mainstream media coverage. The Seminole Nation of Oklahoma has 2 terms in a row ousted the incumbent chief and replaced him with somebody else. And there's only one article on the internet available about that, and that was the most recent one that we did. There was no record of the past election in 2017 where then Chief-elect Chilcote was brought into office. We have a lot of people who've been consuming news for generations in a way that maybe they're not fully adjusted yet to the modern channels of information, if you will. It is difficult being an online-only publication because we're very reliant on algorithms that we don't understand. Whatever Facebook is doing to choose who gets to see our content, who doesn't. Whatever Google is doing to randomly select our political cartoons on Sundays to be, boosted into the news feeds of a lot of Oklahomans. But a 3,000-word article detailing the problems with the Oklahoma property tax protest system and how that's affecting school districts and county government all over the state, Google doesn't care about hyping that, right? They're not going to put that in front of you.
Yeah, who cares about property taxes, right? If you went to a public school here in Oklahoma, you really should care about property taxes. Now, I know most of you probably don't own property, but it's an interesting thing that only they're covering. Most other news sites or television news are not covering these in-depth stories. So that's kind of where you get this division between print, online print per se, like non-doc, or television news. Television news, I always say, has the helicopter reporters. They kind of just fly into a scene and leave. They don't do any in-depth journalism. Should we be worried about this? Yes, no. Should we be worried about what news we get? Or should we just go on about our daily lives? A lot of America goes on with their daily lives. Who cares about news? That's what my parents do, right? So one big thing that's been coming out is this nonprofit news. I used to work for the Oklahoman, was a reporter there. It was a for-profit. We put the print out every day. These companies are nonprofit news sources. My T-Town folks, Tulsa folks know the Frontier, that's based in Tulsa, Oklahoma Watch here in Oklahoma City, and Non-Doc here in Oklahoma City. They're all great resources to get good Oklahoma information. So we're going to talk about traditional news. Does anybody in here watch the 5 o'clock news? I have like one person, Melody. Do what? Nobody has live TV. Does anybody in here have cable? Let me ask that. 1, 2, 3. Wow. No, that's not you. You're not your parents. You're an adult. So one interesting thing is that Newsroom Employment, sorry to our journalism person over here, Newsroom Employment has dropped by 28% since 2008. So you kind of know the market coming out, go into advertising. That we see these newsrooms are getting smaller, so it's straining journalism. So we don't have in-depth stories. We don't have stories on property taxes, what's going on at your city council, or the next election in Norman on water rates. It just doesn't get covered. So television networks, we'll talk about them for our 3 or 4 who have typical cable news. But I also think it's interesting because this is what your parents are getting. So we see at this chart here, the winner of average audience views is Fox News. They have about 3 million people watch every night. They're watching that 8 o'clock Sean Hannity show, I bet. And then we have CNN and MSNBC down here, barely scraping by. I mean, they're still getting 1.6 million people a day, but it's a lot less than Fox News. And this goes comparing it to the organic social media stuff. Is that the Republicans seem to have a wider audience and can hit more people with their megaphone, because Fox News is a megaphone. Sean Hannity and all those kind of shows are talk shows. They're not news shows. It's not the 5 o'clock news. It's not NBC National News. It's not that. They have people come on, columnists, contributors, all that, and just talk about whatever they want. It's not as regulated as a newsprint or anything like that. So make sure you know the difference there when watching. You watch whatever you want, I don't care. So, yeah. Yes, they did just win that. So Fox News, like Tucker Carlson, well, he's on at 7, I think. Like National Enquirer. So they won a case in this malice dispute that no reasonable person would believe him. This is true. You look it up. May even send it out later. But if you're watching him and believing that, the courts have said that you're not a reasonable person if you believe him. So only reasonable people believe he's false or just making things up, like the National Enquirer, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. Look that up. So one big thing, most stations like your KOCO, KFOR, all these local stations are owned by a few conglomerates across the nation. The biggest one here is Sinclair Media. They own 185 television stations, 620 channels, and 86 markets. That's a megaphone, if I've ever heard of one. And they're not the big Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they're like Channel 6, Channel 9, those stations. Why does this matter? They own a lot. Anybody know? Broadcast or journalism person? She's busy on TikTok. Anyways, yeah. Always? I don't know, I'm asking you. Smaller groups, yeah, and most people trust these stations more. But if you have a national organization, what they do is they send these things called packages out to all their stations and they force air them. So they have to spend 3 minutes talking about this package that came from the national organization. Sinclair, very conservative. So they can send out a package to all these organizations across the nation with a conservative bent, getting people who trust them more. They're much more effective sometimes than these other ones of getting average people. So it's kind of big there, the power that they have. So my NPR people over here, this is what a recording studio looks like. Been in one, several. Nearly 14 million people each week download an NPR podcast. We're good, 20 minutes or so, not long. NPR and PRX are largest radio news groups that kind of push things out. And then Americans are turning to the radio less frequent. See? Interesting enough that these podcasts are actually growing, but while traditional radio is declining. I'm on the board for a radio station here in Oklahoma. We're having to think about how we transition to the next generation. It's very important because y'all don't turn on the FM radio anymore. It's all get your aux cable out, do it that way. We can get exactly what we want. We don't have to worry about this other stuff. So we see the traditional radio is declining. So kind of an interesting thing, and it's very recent, within the last year or two that it started to decline. Still very high, but declining. Got something? Yeah, you can change Facebook to Twitter. We're getting ready for something. So this is something you'll probably want to know. Talking about media bias. This is the media bias chart. Kind of talks about the bias of all these news organizations. I know some of you said Wall Street Journal, it's up here. Excuse the right. No surprise. All these others. So this shows kind of where you should be getting your news from. Reuters, AP, NPR, NewsHour, PBS, all these are up here at the very top, very balanced in their news coverage. We're talking the news section here. And these are good places you should get your news. If you're getting your news from the Alex Jones Show, InfoWars, or the Jimmy Dore Show, I've never even heard of that, or Occupy Democrats, probably not the best sources for news. You may get a laugh out of them, but you may start to believe it. Like this guy in the red over here. Yeah, I know. Anyways, that link takes you there. May be good for an exam coming up. So Americans' trust in mass media is declining overall. We see back here in 98, back in the Stone Ages, that 53% of Americans kind of trusted in this mass media. Democrats obviously trust the media more than Republicans, and it's stayed that way, and will probably continue that way. But we see that Republicans, only 10% trust mass media. So it's pretty small. So where are they getting their news? Goes back to social media. And they have a bigger megaphone. And they can share it. Democrats, on the other hand, 73% believe in mass media, but they still have to pay more for it. So there's more trust there. So we're going to ask a poll. Number one is going to be Twitter, because nobody uses Facebook. But Melody is going to have that poll up right now. Which app do you use the most? Big question. Why do people use TikTok? I'm going to walk around while this poll is going out. Why do we use TikTok? Are you on TikTok? Why do you use TikTok?
Entertaining.
Entertaining. You get any news on it?
No.
No. Okay. Anybody over here? This should be based on your screen time. Why do you use TikTok?
Because it's fun to watch.
Fun to watch? What else?
Just watch videos with friends.
Yeah, there you go.
You don't have to keep your mind on one thing.
Ooh, don't have to keep your mind on something for too long. There we go. There's an interesting point. Melody will have our results up here in a second. This is a prison that I was at in Texas. Got held at gunpoint there. Fun times. Don't start putting up. But interesting point on that is you don't have to think. You're just scrolling through TikTok, next video, or Instagram Reels. You're not thinking, oh, I slipped something in there, an ad or anything like that. It can start pushing you in a certain direction. You know, YouTube got in a big trouble a couple of years ago because they were radicalizing their videos as you watched. So when you watched one video, it took you a little more radical and more radical and more radical. And then at one point, you're watching crazy stuff. It's just what happens when we lose our attention on these things. So we'll see which app is used most. TikTok. Wow, pretty bad. We have three cents. TikTok, 38%, Snapchat, 33%, Instagram, 24%, and Twitter, 5%. Same as Facebook from earlier class. Even though the first class had a lot of Twitter users, which was kind of surprising. So it's interesting that TikTok is taking over and we're not thinking. So we got to get to the point of life. I'm going to change minds. And there's this book I like to read. If you were in my class last week, we read a book. This is a different book. This is called The Matriarch by Barbara Bush. You don't need your computers anymore, so you can turn them down for a second. Interesting. She was the first lady under George H.W. Bush. So I'm going to read you a little bit about this, and here's some things to think about as we go about our daily lives. So in a speech that lasted just 11 minutes, Barbara Bush urged the graduates, college graduates, to make three choices. The first was to believe in something bigger than themselves, as she had done with literacy. The second was to live their lives with joy, again, as she had. And the third choice, which must not be missed, is to cherish your human connections, your relationships with family and friends, she went on. For several years, you've had impressed upon you the importance of your career of dedication and hard work. And of course, that's true, but as important as your obligations as doctors, lawyer, or business leader will be, you're a human being first. And those human connections with spouses, with children, with friends, are the most important investment you'll ever make. At the end of your life, you'll never regret having not passed one more test, not winning one more verdict, not closing one more deal, she told them. You will regret time not spent with a spouse, a friend, or a parent. So remember that, spending time on social media. I'm going to hand it over to Melody. I know she has some good news that'll be coming out here in a second. We've been working.
So on Friday,
Yeah.
Woo! We don't know what that means in Oklahoma. We don't know. That's exactly. Right?
Yeah.
We have no idea what that means. And so I also know that spring break starts the next day.
Talking to my personal trainer, who's from Canada. She's like, it's like -40 and we don't shop.
Am I the only one?
Functioning. I was just like, I don't feel that. It's like we're calling up -5. Fuck that, we're staying home.
See, like -5, I get, but like here, it's just like they just like, oh, a little bit of snow, everything shut. You know.
And you get your participation point. Okay? So that's what's going to happen on Friday. We will remind you of this via email.
I will not be.
Your fellows will remind you of this as well. They're happy to have their staff.
Not at all.
I'm just a dick. Like, if you don't pay attention, they're